Gala night. The single word, worthless, cut through the chatter and hit like an accusation. Ashley Bennett said it in front of her colleagues, and they laughed. Her boss, Derek Sloan, stayed close enough to make the moment feel arranged. My life, condensed into one dismissive line. I felt small, the kind of small that sits under coat racks and pretends not to breathe. There was a metallic aftertaste to shame, raw, precise. My pulse climbed, not fuel for spectacle, but for something quieter. Focus. I could have made a scene. I could have been the headline. Instead, I walked out into the night and let the cold set the shape of my next move. It felt less like defeat than like inventory, counting receipts, presents, leverage. She'd announced the death of our marriage in public. She hadn't realized that doing it on stage handed me the proof I'd need. This wasn't the finale. It was the first page of the record I would build. I'm Mark Carter, 34, accountant at a mid-sized firm where the coffee is average but the paychecks land on time. My dad used to say, "Fancy fades, steady stays," and I built my life around that line. Mortgage paid, oil changes on schedule, a grill that knows my Saturdays. 8 years married taught me to value quiet reliability, to show up when nobody's watching. I'm not the loudest at a party or the flashiest at work. I count things that matter. Hours put in, promises kept, receipts filed. It's not romantic, I know, but it keeps the lights on and the pressure down. Or so I thought. Tonight made me wonder if steady had been mistaken for small, if my calm looked like a doormat from a distance. Standing there under the chandeliers, it hit me. I'd built a house on bedrock and invited someone who brought a wrecking ball. I didn't know it yet, but the first crack had just surfaced. Ashley Bennett collected rooms the way some people collect shoes, confidently, loudly, like the world owed her a spotlight. Marketing suited her, handshakes, quick laughs, the perfume of ambition you can smell before you see the dress. She loved the chase, the next title, the next introduction, the next story to tell. I told myself I admired that drive, that we were a team. I'd keep us grounded while she reached higher. Truth is, it's easy to confuse different with complementary. She liked the kind of places where waiters learn your name and bills arrive inside leather. I like being on a first-name basis with the guy at the hardware store. For a while it worked. We built a life somewhere between those two counters, business cards and socket wrenches. But lately, the scale tipped. Her calendar ate our dinners, her phone ate our conversations. And tonight, as I watched her float through that ballroom, I realized I was watching someone who didn't need a partner. She needed an audience. Corporate parties always feel like airports, loud, bright, and nobody really wants to be there. I showed up because she said it meant something for her career. I parked near the exit out of habit, call it a working man's survival skill. Inside, everything glittered. Chandeliers, chrome bar backs, people laughing a little too hard at jokes that wouldn't survive the drive home. I found my place by the coat rack, the unofficial shelter for spouses who know how to disappear. That corner has a quiet dignity. You keep your jacket, you keep your distance, you keep your mouth shut. I've done harder things. I've held flashlights for weekend repairs, lifted couches up narrow stairs, sat through dental cleanings without numbing. How bad could a party be? The answer arrived on cue. The playlist dipped, a speaker crackled, and a pocket of conversation sharpened. From across the room, a voice I knew by heart got ready to rewrite my life in one sentence. There's a kind of laugh that isn't about humor. It's about power. I heard it before I saw her. Ashley's laugh, high and bright, pulling a circle of colleagues tighter. The lights threw diamonds across the ceiling like confetti. I felt none of it. She tipped her glass, leaned in, and then came the line. I could dump him tomorrow if I wanted. He's worthless. The word rang out with the clarity of a gavel. No music, no clinking flute could blunt it. Faces turned. Some smirked. One woman looked down into her drink like it could hide her. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, trying to keep my shoulders from rising, trying to keep my face from folding. That single word worked fast, like bleach on fabric. It stripped the color out of 8 years. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was the public nature of it, the way humiliation chooses witnesses. That's when the room, finally, began to feel small. Derek Sloan is the kind of manager who introduces himself with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Married, crisp shirt, a watch that tells time and status. I'd met him twice. Polite, distant, forgettable, until he wasn't. His hand brushed Ashley's arm like it had a habit of doing that. The circle leaned in. She tilted her head in that practiced way, as if the room existed to echo her. I watched the space between them shrink to the width of a promise nobody said out loud. I'm not naive. I've been around long enough to recognize the choreography, those half seconds that add up to a story. It wasn't one touch. It was a pattern. Late meetings, laughter sent to the wrong person, a phone face down for months. The laugh, the line, the hand, 3 beats that made a song I couldn't unhear. I didn't move, I didn't speak, I learned something instead. Sometimes the most useful note you take is the one you don't write down. Men in movies flip tables. Men in headlines throw punches. Men on Monday mornings sit in HR regretting both. I thought about all 3 in a single breath. Then I pictured Noah, my nephew, the kid who thinks I can fix anything with a screwdriver and time. I pictured my mother's kitchen clock, the one that ticks steady no matter who's arguing. And I pictured payday, the way you breathe easier when duty's been met. I chose that breath. I let the anger slide down into my boots where it could cool. You don't get a medal for restraint. You get something better. Options. I kept my jacket on the hook for 5 more seconds, 5 more heartbeats, 5 more chances to do the wrong thing. Then I walked, not toward her, not toward them, toward the door that was designed for adults who know when to leave. The best choice I made all night was the one nobody noticed. I refused to audition for their story. Cold air has a way of telling the truth. The doors opened, and the November night cleared the champagne from my head. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look back through the glass to see if anyone followed. I counted my steps like a man crossing black ice. Silence isn't surrender. It's storage. You put the moment away before it breaks in your hands. Out on the sidewalk, a bus released its brakes with a sigh. A couple argued quietly about directions, and the city proved it would keep going whether I went to pieces or not. That steadied me. I reached the corner and waited for the light. A small thing, but important. Obey one rule when everything else feels lawless. The crosswalk blinked white. I crossed. People will tell you anger is power. Sometimes the real power is homework. I made a promise right there under a flickering street lamp. I will answer this with order, not theater. I walked 3 blocks without feeling my hands. Not from the cold, just that shock that sits in your chest like a forgotten tool. My dad used to take long loops around our neighborhood when he needed to think. Keep your feet moving, your head will follow. I let my feet do their job. The city offered up small mercies, a diner that smelled like bacon, a cab driver laughing at his radio, a doorman nodding like he'd seen worse. Normal life, still happening. That helped. The party had made me feel like a prop. The street made me feel like a person again. I passed a storefront that sold power tools and thought about torque, leverage, and why some bolts won't turn until you use the right socket. That was the lesson. I didn't need more force. I needed the right tool. I reached for my phone, not to write a paragraph, just to type 3 words that would tilt the board. Adam Blake. That's the name I tapped. We'd muddled through a year of law school together before I chose numbers over motions. He chose compliance, the part of a company that pays attention when nobody else wants to. He answered on the second ring. Mark? Been a while. I gave him the short version. No color, no drama. Just facts anyone could verify by morning if they cared to look. Dates, times, who stood where. He didn't interrupt. He knows how to listen like a ledger. Clean lines, no smudges. All right, he said. Do not engage, do not confront. Send me what you have. Now. I promised I would. He paused. Tonight matters. Tomorrow, stories change. That line landed hard. People sober up. Alibis sharpen. Screenshots vanish. I ended the call with one more decision. This wouldn't be about punishing Ashley. It would be about proving me. I opened a blank email and started laying down rails. Breadcrumbs aren't gossip. They're timestamps. I sent Adam a list. Calendar invites, late-night Uber receipts, a hotel charge that never matched our credit card conversations, a photo from a work event where Derek's hand lived a little too casually on my wife's elbow. I added no adjectives, only places where a person could stand and see what I saw. I CC'd my personal account to create a mirror. Then I attached a note to myself with the time and location I left the party. Subject: exit, 9:12 p.m. I put my phone away and looked up at the sky like it had something to say. It didn't. So I said it to myself. No scenes. Only records. A police car rolled by, slow and ordinary. A couple kids ran past, laughing, jackets flapping like flags. Life kept its pace. My email pinged. Received. One word from Adam, enough to move us from feelings to filings. For the first time all night, my shoulders eased. Back at my truck, I sat with the engine off and the heater stubborn, the cabin smelling like old coffee and last weekend's hardware store run. I thought about home, the dent in our couch cushion, the squeaky hinge I kept meaning to oil, the way Ashley's heels sounded on our hallway tile. I let the quiet tell me what to do next. No dramatic turns, just the next right thing. I opened my notes app and created a new file. Inventory. Not of stuff, of truth. What I knew, what I suspected, what I could prove. Then I drew a line under it and wrote, "Don't chase, don't beg, don't bluff." The screen dimmed, and in that reflection I saw a man I recognized. Tired, yes, but solid. I turned the key. The radio came alive mid-song, something from a decade ago about getting back up. I didn't sing. I drove. Somewhere behind me a ballroom kept its beat. Somewhere ahead, a domino waited for the tap. Adam didn't waste words. "I'll check," he said, voice flat like a level on fresh lumber. That's all I needed. I parked by a gas station, bought a coffee that tasted like cardboard and late shifts, and sat under a buzzing light that made everything honest. Older folks will know this feeling, the quiet of a parking lot where you've talked yourself through hard choices, moving houses, calling a doctor, signing a form. I opened my notes and turned feelings into bullet points. Times, names, places. I sent Adam the packet and waited with the engine off, just listening to the tick-tick of cooling metal. He texted back one line. "I'm inside." Not dramatic, not heroic, just useful. That grounded me. I didn't need fireworks. I needed facts. I tossed the coffee, wiped my hands on a napkin, and stared at the street like it might blink first. It didn't. My phone did. "Updates coming," Adam wrote. A clock started in my head. Adam's messages arrived like radio from a different war. "She's holding court near the bar. Sloane's here. Same circle as before." He didn't editorialize, he time-stamped. That's how you talk to a man who needs the truth more than comfort. I pictured the layout, chandeliers, high tables, the glow on glass, while sitting in my truck, heater on low, letting the vents unfreeze my fingers. There's a steadiness you learn from long commutes and longer winters. Breathe, read, respond. Adam sent a photo of the room. No faces, just context, like a contractor sending progress shots. Then 3 dots appeared, hovered, vanished, returned. "New arrival," he wrote. My chest tightened, not with panic but recognition. In stories older men tell on porches, there's always a moment when someone important shows up and everything tilts. The party had a new gravity now. I locked my screen, set the phone face down, and waited for it to buzz again. It didn't take long. Regional director entered. "Richard Hale," the text read. The tone in the room shifted. I could feel it secondhand. I've seen that shift before, in break rooms when the big boss visits, in church foyers when the family you wronged appears, in living rooms when your dad finally says your full name. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just arrives and oxygen gets expensive. Adam's next line, "He's moving with purpose." I pictured Hale cutting a path through small talk like a snowplow through slush. People move when a man like that moves. The heater in my truck hummed. My hand hovered over the ignition like a reflex. "Don't go back in," I told myself. "You left for a reason." The next message landed hard. "He's heading straight for her." I could almost hear the music sag. My thumb hovered over call, then stopped. No scenes, only records. The screen lit again. He spoke her name, loud. A long breath left me before I even knew I'd taken it. Adam's words came faster. He asked, "What did you do?" Then, Glass dropped. I saw it. Champagne exploding on marble. Laughter snapping shut like a pocket knife. Some lessons you don't forget. Public praise is light as air. Public shame has weight. Hale wasn't the kind to sugarcoat. Adam wrote, "He's furious." I imagined the quiet after a snapped branch, everyone calculating where they stand. I've felt that quiet before. At funerals when the eulogy goes honest. At job sites when a shortcut gets exposed. It's the hush that says truth arrived early. I gripped the steering wheel and loosened it again. A younger version of me would have run inside to claim the moment. The man I am stayed seated and trusted the chain he'd set in motion. Another ping. He told her the company isn't a playground. A smaller, meaner part of me smiled. Then came the line that mattered most. Phone's out. That was the spark. Stories don't stay in rooms anymore. Derek tried to step in. Hale shoved him. Adam texted. I pictured Sloane's polished shoes skidding into a cocktail table, glasses scattering like excuses. There's a special kind of silence when a boss gets handled in public. Respect changes address. I've seen it on shop floors when the supervisor's pet project fails inspection. I've seen it in kitchens when someone talks tough and drops the hot pan. People remember who lost their grip. Adam added, security watching. That's corporate for measure your words, your hands, your future. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. The scene was writing itself, badly, for them. I thought about all the times I'd tried to explain gut feelings and got told I was dramatic or defensive. Tonight the evidence had its own microphone. Another buzz. Hale, we will find out everything. I exhaled slow. Not relief, alignment. For the first time in months, the room and reality finally matched. Phones everywhere, Adam wrote. Recording. He sent a wide shot, no faces, just a sea of raised screens catching someone else's worst minute. That's modern life. The cloud remembers what our nerves try to forget. I felt a flicker of pity and tamped it down. Pity is expensive when you're paying for someone else's choices. Then, whispers starting. Bad news moves like a brush fire, dry air, quick wind, and suddenly the whole block knows. I thought of neighborhood stories from the 90s, how fast a secret traveled before group texts existed. Multiply that by 10 now. Adam's next lines were shorter. HR here, compliance here, legal here. The trifecta. Meetings that end careers don't set themselves. They warm up first. My phone buzzed again. Hale left the floor. It meant the center of gravity was on the move. In the rearview mirror, I watched my own breath fog up and clear, fog up and clear. The night did not care. That steadied me. I drove without a destination, letting streetlights pace my thoughts. It's odd how calm can show up after impact, like the quiet right after a car door slams and you realize you didn't dent anything. Older men talk about it, how you survive the Marine's shout or the factory alarm by finding a rhythm inside the noise. That's what I found, a small rhythm. Left turn, green light, wipers squeak. I wasn't happy. I wasn't vindicated. I was functioning. And that felt like a victory. I passed the diner again, thought about eggs and silence, kept going. Adam texted, "We'll brief in morning. Store everything you have." Message received. I made a mental checklist. Accounts, titles, passwords, folders. There's dignity in administration when love turns into liability. I circled the block once more and headed home, hands steady on the wheel. The party would recover its music. Mine was changing key. She came in at daylight looking like the night had bitten her. Mascara blurred, dress creased, shoulders sloped the way shoulders do when the body is carrying more than fabric. I'd already made coffee, the good kind, not the gas station kind, and set my laptop on the kitchen table like a judge sets down a file. There's a tone older couples know, the tone you use when the argument is over and the decisions remain. I used that tone. Morning. She went straight to fury, as if anger could rewrite footage. What did you do? I didn't answer the question she asked. I answered the one that mattered. We need to discuss the truth. Her eyes flashed. You're destroying my career. We both paused at the word my. Possession had finally said its quiet part loud. I turned the screen toward her and let the cursor blink between us like a metronome. The house didn't shake. The foundation did. She threw words like plates, loud, sharp, meant to make me flinch. Betrayal, sabotage, small man. I've learned something from years of budget meetings and family holidays. The loudest sentence isn't always the truest. I didn't match her volume. I matched her with nouns, dates, transactions, locations. While she swung, I stacked. This charge on the company card. This ride across town. This calendar block that overlaps his. Each line cooled the room the way truth does when it stops being theoretical. She tried to reframe it all as effort, mentorship, possibility. But there's a tone people use when they know a door is closing. You can hear the hallway in it. I kept my hands flat on the table so I wouldn't jab the air like a prosecutor. I am not here to humiliate you, I said. I'm here to end what's already over. Her jaw set, then trembled. Two realities fighting for the same face. I clicked once and the document tree unfolded. Neat, boring, lethal. Divorce petition. Filed. Bank accounts. Separated within the law. Title changes. Executed or queued. Anyone who's managed an estate or closed a parent's house knows this feeling. The cold mercy of paperwork done right. It doesn't fix the ache, but it keeps the lights on while you heal. Ashley stared at the screen like it would apologize. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already did," I answered, not as a threat, just as a fact. Preparation isn't cruelty, it's survival. I scrolled through confirmations and timestamps, then stopped talking. Silence can be generous when it leaves room for the truth to arrive on its own 2 feet. She reached for the trackpad. Her hand shook. In the reflection, I saw both of us older than yesterday. She looked up, searching my face for softness. I had plenty of kindness left. I just didn't have any more denial. Older adults will recognize this list the way carpenters recognize tools. Insurance beneficiaries reviewed, joint accounts partitioned, 2-factor added, wills and emergency contacts updated. I moved calmly, no speed, only sequence. If you've ever sat with a banker after a death or a divorce, you know the rhythm. Present ID, sign, initial, confirm. It's not romantic, it's respectful to your future self and anyone who depends on you. Ashley kept insisting there would be explanations, that I was overreacting, that everyone does what it takes to get ahead. The sentence landed like a nail in dry wood, too clean, which made it worse. I forwarded confirmations to Adam, CC'd my personal email, and backed up the folder twice. Then I closed the laptop and folded my hands because posture matters when the ground moves. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's inventory." She stared at the floor like it had an answer. The fridge hummed. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck downshifted. Life insisted on continuing. There's a second when the storm inside a person meets the weather outside. For Ashley, it arrived quietly. The color drained. The shoulders that once filled rooms seemed to fit inside a coat hanger. She sank into a chair not for drama, but because sitting was the only verb left. I slid a single page across the table, the summary you use when someone can't process the stack. She read, stopped, went back, read again. I didn't gloat. I didn't comfort. I did what older men taught me to do when a job is finished. I checked my work. "Everything here is lawful," I said, "and final." She lifted her eyes like they were heavier than the rest of her, and for the first time since the gala, the word "we" left her mouth. "What happens to us?" The answer didn't need volume. "We end with order." A bird thumped the window and flew on, startle, then flight. That felt right. The first domino tipped. "You can't do that," Ashley said, voice shaking like a ladder on bad concrete. I kept my hands flat on the table. "I can," I answered, "because facts don't need volume." I wasn't trying to win the argument, I was closing the account. She searched my face for the old softness, the kind that overlooks small things until they become big. It wasn't there. Years of steady habits had finally served a purpose. I could stay calm while the room spun. "This is my career," she tried again. I nodded once. "And this is my life." Older men taught me that clarity is kindness when the truth is late. I slid the summary back toward her and let the silence work. She stared at my signature like it was a cliff edge. So that's it? That's the start, I said. The coffee clocked a quiet drip behind us. Somewhere down the hall, the heater kicked on. The house was ready for a change. We never had a prenup. Not because I refused, but because she called it unromantic. And at 26, I believed love could carry any load. Older folks smile at that. Kind, tired smiles that say they've paid tuition to the same school. So I learned the hard way what paperwork is really for. Not to fight each other, but to keep the floor from falling out when one of you jumps. I told Ashley exactly that. This isn't punishment, it's perimeter. She scoffed, but she listened. I explained where joint became separate, how obligations would still be honored, how we'd handle the basics like adults, mortgage, utilities, insurance, no fireworks, just sequence. You planned this, she said, like planning was a sin. After you announced the end in public, I answered. She folded her arms, then unfolded them, the way people do when they've run out of poses. So what happens now? You pack what's yours, I said. I'll pack what's mine. And we don't add new damage. There was one line I needed to say, not for effect, but for the record I'd promised to keep. You called me worthless, I told her, and I let that sit in the room for too long. I'm not proving you wrong to hurt you. I'm proving me to me. She blinked. It landed. Men my age know this feeling, the moment you stop asking for permission to be solid. I didn't raise my voice, I raised my standard. From here on, I said, I'm measured by what I do, not what you say. She tried to wave it off with a tired laugh, the kind people use when they hope the scene will dissolve. It didn't. I stood, gathered my notes, and pushed in my chair, little courtesies that feel like ballast when the water's rough. At the doorway I paused. You have time to gather your things. I'll be in the bedroom. A small mercy and a boundary. Both can stand in the same sentence. Our closet had always been crowded, her dresses marching like a parade, my shirts in quiet formation. That morning it looked like a diagram of leaving. My side was empty. I'd moved it all the night before into storage tubs with labels you could read from across the room. It wasn't spite, it was clarity. When a thing is over, you stop pretending it isn't. I heard her footsteps in the hallway and stepped aside. She took one look and gripped the doorframe. You're really doing this, she whispered. I nodded. There's a strange dignity in seeing space where your life used to hang. You finally understand how much of marriage is logistics. Where did it all go? Packed, I said. Same as we'll do with the rest. She stood there a full 10 seconds, then said the practical thing people say when the heart is late. We'll need boxes. I've got them, I answered. It was my way of saying the decision is made. On the dresser sat a manila folder with a black Sharpie label. Insurance. Not the policy kind, the protection kind. Inside, statements, acknowledgments, the boring ballast that keeps grief from capsizing the boat. I set it there for both of us to see because hiding only breeds drama. She opened the flap, expecting a trap, finding order. Account numbers redacted, dates and initials neat as a ledger, a checklist with squares filled in slowly, honestly. You cataloged everything, she said, half accusation, half awe. It's the only way I know to keep promises when the ground moves, I said. Older adults recognize that rhythm. You make a file when the emotions won't file themselves. She flipped to the back and saw the smaller sleeve, USB, labeled Play Me in my block letters. Her thumb hesitated over it. What's this? Context, I said. She swallowed and slipped it into her laptop. The room adjusted itself, as rooms do right before a truth arrives. Her laptop dinged, the audio loaded, and her own voice stepped into the room like a witness. I could dump him tomorrow. He's worthless. No edits, no soundtrack, just the sound of a bridge burning while people clapped. Ashley gasped like the oxygen had changed. You recorded me, she said, anger rising to swat at the nearest branch. I didn't have to, I answered. You recorded yourself. I just caught what the room already heard. It matters, for men like me, to keep the lines clean. Not entrapment, not revenge, documentation. Context is cruel, she said, eyes wet. No, I said softly. Context is honest. She closed the laptop with both hands as if gentleness could reverse time. It couldn't. The house felt different after that, lighter in the way attics do when you haul out the heavy box you've ignored for years. She set the computer down and stared at the floor. You could hear the clock again. That's when her phone lit up. Mom, she answered on speaker without meaning to. Evelyn Bennett doesn't waste syllables. She's the kind of woman who built a real estate portfolio with a calculator and nerve. Why is your name missing from the condo notice? Evelyn asked, voice cool as tile. Ashley's eyes bounced between me and the screen. Mark, he's retaliating. Evelyn's reply came like a stamp. Quiet men aren't weak. They plan. Decades of deals were in that sentence. I said nothing. I didn't need an ally. I needed accuracy. Evelyn continued. Legal notifications hit my inbox all morning. Everything's clean. That means he did the homework you should have done before making a spectacle at work. Ashley tried to pivot to grievance. Evelyn steered back to facts. You mistook applause for leverage, she said. The line wasn't cruel. It was calibrated. The call ended with a hollow chime. Ashley lowered the phone like it weighed more than the laptop. For the first time since the gala, the room felt honest. People think collapse is loud. Sometimes it's a chair pulling back and someone sitting because standing requires a story they no longer have. Ashley lowered herself to the edge of the bed. The fight left her shoulders. No speeches, no bargains, just quiet acknowledgement that the scaffolding she'd leaned on wasn't load-bearing. I didn't move toward her. I didn't move away. I held my spot the way a beam holds a ceiling. No drama, just duty. What am I supposed to do? She asked into the space between us. It wasn't a trap. It was a human question. You do your part, I said. I'll do mine. We end this clean. She nodded once, the smallest agreement we had made in months. Outside, a delivery truck clattered over the speed bump at the corner, then carried on. That sound felt right. Weight managed. Progress made. I picked up the empty wardrobe boxes and set them by the door. She saw the gesture. She stood to pack. I've moved enough times to know the order. Drawers, closet, bathroom, kitchen. Label by room, not by sentiment. Older adults invented this wisdom, and I've adopted it gratefully. We worked without talking. She folded. I taped. She sorted. I carried. If a memory tried to speak, I let the sound pass through, like wind in a hallway. We made 2 stacks, keep and return. When she hesitated over a photo, I didn't look. When I paused over a birthday card, she didn't ask. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was helpful. Midway through, she said, I thought you'd scream. I thought I would too, I admitted. Turns out, I'd rather finish. We filled the last box and set it with the others, a small skyline of past tense. I wrote dates on the tops, because dates matter when your future asks, when did you decide? She watched me cap the marker. Where will you go? Somewhere steady, I said. The word finally sounded like home. We reached the front hall and stopped under the small wooden plaque that says welcome, a word that had become complicated. I lifted my key ring and slid off the house key. It clicked against the hook like a period at the end of a long sentence. You don't have to do that now, she said. I do, I answered. Boundaries don't work on layaway. She removed her own key and set it beside mine. For a beat, we stood like neighbors instead of spouses, 2 people who shared a roof and a chapter and now shared a good exit. I'll have the movers take my boxes tomorrow, she said. I'll be out tonight. I nodded. We both looked at the living room where so many small, unremarkable evenings had done their quiet work. That's what I'll miss. Not the parties, not the pictures. The ordinary. I took my jacket from the hook. I'll grab my truck from storage, I said. Text when you're done. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. The apartment wasn't much, but it was honest. Clean counters, working stove, a window that gave you real daylight instead of a view of another wall. I set my duffel down and boiled water like a man resetting a clock. The first cup tasted better than it had any right to, maybe because no one was talking while I drank it. I took inventory the way older men do on new ground. Where's the breaker box? Which faucet drips? How's the door hinge? You fix small things first. It reminds you you're useful. I shot Adam a text. I'm out, everything labeled. He replied, good, document any contact. Practical words, exactly what I needed. I opened the laptop and started a new file. Next steps, HR, counsel, financial confirmations, mail forwarding. No flourishes, just boxes to check. The clock on the stove blinked 12 o'clock like every apartment clock does. I set the time, rinsed the mug, and looked around. It wasn't lonely. It was quiet. There's a difference. That first night, I slept like someone who'd been carrying a box too far, and finally set it down. Morning brought sunlight on bare walls and the gentle scratch of a city waking up. Garbage truck, bus break, a neighbor's dog lobbying for breakfast. I brewed another cup, better than the one before, and stood by the window with both hands around the heat. There's a steadiness older adults talk about, the kind you find after storms when the power's back and the fridge hums again. That's what the apartment sounded like. Normal returning in small noises. I sent a simple message to Ashley. Box pickup confirmed. Leave keys in envelope. No apology, no victory lap, just the work. Then I called my mother and told her I was fine, because mothers earn that call. She asked if I needed anything. I've got coffee, I said. We laughed, soft and grateful. When I hung up, I opened a clean page labeled Rebuild. That was the point. Not to scorch earth, just to start real. By morning, the internet had a new toy. A 30-second clip from the gala, my wife's voice saying worthless, paired with a simple overlay. Plot twist. He wasn't. No speeches, no analysis, just the moment and a line that landed like a stamped receipt. Older folks say sunlight is a good disinfectant. Online, it's jet fuel. The clip didn't need a narrator. It carried its own weight the way a signed check does. I watched it once, then set my phone down because you can lose hours in a comment section and still not find peace. But the numbers climbed anyway. Views, likes, the small counters that tell you your private life has been turned into a public lesson. Somewhere between reposts, I realized what the clip really recorded. Not just an insult, but the setting. Colleagues, champagne, a boss close enough to catch the splash. That context mattered. It always does. By 8 a.m., HR phones would be ringing. I poured coffee and waited. Shares multiplied the way rumors used to jump backyard fences. Quiet, quick, inevitable. The comments turned sharp. Not about romance, but about ethics. Who trashes a spouse at a company event? If the boss is that close in public, imagine in private. I didn't add a word. Men my age know that silence ages well. Statements often don't. Still, every ping carried a memory of the ballroom, and I let myself feel it without drowning in it. Then a familiar truth surfaced. The internet likes a moral to the story. The overlay gave it one. I could almost hear my father. When folks are given a simple line to carry, they'll carry it. By mid-morning, the clip had moved from friends of friends to strangers with opinions. That's when you know momentum isn't yours anymore. It's weather. You don't control wind. You close windows and brace. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb, opened my laptop, and checked the folder labeled Records. If you've ever worked in a real office, you know the laugh people use to avoid choosing sides. That laugh showed up online. Coworkers trying to distance themselves with jokes. A former assistant posting crying, laughing emojis under a repost. It annoyed me more than the original insult. I've seen that laugh at school board meetings, job sites, even funerals. The sound of folks pretending neutrality when the truth costs too much. I didn't call anyone out. I didn't need to. Their own words did it for me. Always wondered how she got special trips. She treated assistants like furniture. Lines like that piled up. It wasn't revenge. It was inventory from people who'd been waiting for permission to speak. I closed the app before it turned into a sport. Somewhere, Ashley would be reading all of it and trying to outrun the sprint of her own momentum. That's not a race you win. My screen dimmed. The apartment felt steady. Then the phone rang. With purpose. LinkedIn picked it up next, which is how you know a workplace story turned into a workplace lesson. The captions changed from jokes to case study. Coaches wrote threads about boundaries. Compliance folks posted bulleted lists about misuse of company resources. TikTok clipped the clip smaller, added dramatic zooms. Instagram dressed it up with text boxes. Same core, different wrappers. The speed was ridiculous. I once watched a brush fire jump a road during a dry summer. This felt the same. Heat, wind, then a new edge burning. For the first time, I felt a flick of pity for Ashley, not for the choices, but for the avalanche. Then I remembered the coat rack and the word she chose. Pity doesn't rebuild a foundation. Accountability might. A notification cut through my thoughts. Unknown number, corporate HR. I let it go to voicemail. This wasn't my investigation to run. The right people now had the right incentive. I poured another cup and waited for the message to transcribe. The transcript came through clean. This is Susan Miller, HR. Ashley, please come in at 2 p.m. today. Bring your handbook and any company property. Anyone who's sat through tough chapters knows that phrase is a bell. Bring your handbook means your employment is about to become past tense. I pictured the conference room. Not the big client room, but the smaller one where chairs are close and the water pitcher sweats onto a paper napkin. I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney and to Adam with a single line. They've set the table. I didn't celebrate. I noted. When you're our age, you learn to mark moments without letting them own you. The rest of the morning, I cleaned the apartment, the kind of chores you do when your mind needs direction. Wipe counters, tighten a hinge, coil an extension cord. At 1:58, I imagined the door handle turning. At 2 o'clock on the dot, I pictured the clock's second hand passing 12. Timing matters in rooms like that. Ashley later told me how the hallway felt longer than usual, like the carpet added miles. I've walked versions of that hallway. Doctors' offices, performance reviews, the quiet walk from a graveside to the car. Your feet move, but your brain lags behind. She stepped into the room and found the lineup I expected. Susan from HR, a compliance lead, and Thomas Reed from legal, neat stack of folders at his elbow. A chair sat alone on the far side of the table. Not cruel, just deliberate. People confuse kindness with comfort. HR traffics in clarity. Susan opened with policy language, precise and patient. Thomas arranged pages into lanes. Travel, expenses, personal conduct. Ashley tried to frame things as misunderstandings, mentorship, optics. The room didn't chase adjectives. It chased facts. When she mentioned me, Susan redirected, "We're here about your employment." That sentence is a fence you can't climb. A folder slid across the table. The pages inside weren't rumors. They had dates. Richard Hale entered without flourish. No raised voice, just presence. Rooms change when a man like that sits down. He looked tired the way leaders get tired. Not of work, but of watching adults refuse to be adults. He glanced at the first page, then at Ashley. "We'll hear you," he said. "Then we'll act." That order matters. She talked about long hours, results, bringing in accounts. He listened with the patience of a man who has sat through arguments that confuse activity with integrity. Then he raised a palm, a small gesture that closes the air. "Receipts," he said to legal. Thomas read hotel dates that matched Derek's travel, cross-referenced with corporate cards, double-checked against calendar blocks labeled strategy. The word landed like a joke that forgot to be funny. Compliance added notes about policy training, the modules everyone clicks through and forgets. Richard didn't sermonize. He asked one question. "Is there anything here that is inaccurate?" Silence answered first. Thomas clicked the remote and a screen woke to life. No faces. Company policy protects more than it punishes. But the pattern was plain. Charges for 2 instead of 1. Upgrades that appeared only when certain names traveled together. Nights extended past the meeting. Then audio, brief, clinical, captured planning language that never should live on a company system. Not romance, logistics. Older adults will recognize the difference. What people call complicated is usually just documented. Ashley's hands trembled. You learn a lot watching hands in hard rooms. Who fidgets, who folds, who steadies their pen before signing. When the audio stopped, Susan summarized policy. Misuse of funds, conflict of interest, conduct harming the company's reputation. Ashley asked for context. The room had it, in writing. She asked for time. The room offered process. She asked about Derek. The room said, handled. There's mercy in boundaries. They tell you exactly how far the floor extends. Then Richard spoke, and the floor ended. "Ms. Bennett," Richard said, voice even, "your employment is terminated effective immediately. We will pursue all available remedies regarding misused funds." No anger, no embellishment, just the sentence that changes a life from present to past. I've heard versions delivered by doctors, judges, even school principals. They share a tone, not cruel, not soft, final. Susan slid a form forward, the kind that organizes endings, return of property, acknowledgement of policies, instructions for COBRA, and final pay. Ashley stared through it the way people stare at waves, seeing motion, hearing roar, absorbing nothing. She asked for a chance to resign. Richard considered, then shook his head. The record stands. That line will follow her longer than the clip. Thomas closed his folder. Compliance stood. The meeting was over not because voices rose, but because process had concluded. That's how real endings work. Quietly, with signatures. Security waited at the door, polite and present. The hall was shorter on the way out. Everyone knows the box, the one the office keeps for days like this. Cardboard, pre-folded, carries a life that once needed 2 desks and a calendar full of plans. Adam texted me a single sentence. "Escort in progress." I didn't ask for photos. Some scenes don't need spectators. Outside, I sat in my truck and watched people exit for lunch holding salads and phones while, across the street, a different appetite got its answer. At 3:41, the doors opened. Ashley stepped into the light with the box in her arms. Frame, plant, mug, a pair of heels she'd kept under her desk. Career, concentrated. She scanned the sidewalk like maybe the pavement could split and offer a new route. It didn't. Security walked a respectful half-step behind, as if guarding a dignity that had survived the meeting. She spotted me through the windshield, paused, and then kept walking. The engine idled, steady as a metronome. I let it count the seconds for me. I parked across from the building long enough to watch the weather match the mood. Gray clouds rolling in, wind tugging at receipts someone dropped near the curb. There's a ritual to witnessing the end of a long argument. You don't gloat, you don't wave, you don't mouth "I told you so." You just verify the facts and go. Ashley set the box down to rest her hands, then lifted it again. That small motion said more than any speech. We've all carried a box like that, after layoffs, after downsizing, after the kind of meeting where titles stop sticking. She reached the corner and turned away from the camera phones that had found her. Good. Not everything needs an audience. My phone buzzed once more. Badge deactivated. Administration, doing its necessary mercy. I put the truck in gear. There are moments for looking back. This wasn't one. I checked my mirrors, signaled, and pulled into the slow river of traffic. I didn't drive far. A cafe down the block had real cups and quiet tables, the kind of place where older men read the paper and younger ones type like rent depends on it. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window facing the office. From here, the building looked like every other glass box in the district, efficient, reflective, forgettable, a place that moves on by Monday. I thought about what justice actually felt like. Not victory, not fireworks, just alignment, truth catching up to story. Some endings you cheer, this one you log. I texted Adam, meeting concluded, understood. He replied, record maintained. Those 2 lines were enough. I finished the cup, left cash on the saucer, habit learned from my father, and stood to go. On the sidewalk, the wind had settled. Across the street, the revolving door spun a new employee into the lobby. That's how the world works. Out, in, continue. I turned toward home. There was more rebuilding to do. The sky went the color of old nickel, wind tugging at receipts along the curb. Ashley stepped out of the building with the standard issue box, plant, frames, mug, career reduced to carry on. I stayed in my truck across the street, heater on low, hands at 10 and 2 like a man waiting out a storm. There's a discipline you learn with age. Don't narrate what doesn't need your voice. She paused, scanned the sidewalk as if a door might open where there wasn't one. It didn't. The revolving door kept spinning for other lives. I took a slow breath and let the windshield frame the moment like a picture I didn't have to keep. Not triumph. Confirmation. We ask the world to be fair. Sometimes it just remembers. She shifted the box in her arms and turned away from the cluster of phones. Good. Some endings deserve fewer witnesses. I checked my mirrors, signaled, and let the truck roll. My part here was finished. At the light, we ended up parallel, her on the sidewalk, me at the curb. She saw me through the glass and froze. 30 seconds stretched thin, the kind of time that weighs more than it measures. I didn't wave, I didn't nod. I kept my face neutral because history doesn't need encore performances. The horn behind me tapped, polite and impatient. Green spread across the intersection. I let the truck move, steady, like a man leaving a job site after the final inspection. Relief isn't loud, it's breathable. In the rear view, she shrank to a figure with a box at a bus stop. The temptation to circle back flickered and died. We'd spent years looping the same argument. The cleanest mercy I could offer was forward motion. The engine smoothed into a highway hum, and with it came a small, necessary thought. I can choose what I carry. Today, I carried nothing that wasn't mine. News about Derek Sloan traveled like bad weather. Fast, predictable, unpleasant. Adam texted first. Terminated. An hour later, a mutual acquaintance added, his wife filed. I didn't cheer. Affairs don't end with clever lines. They end with paperwork and long nights in spare bedrooms. I know the sound of those nights. Fridge hum, lonely TV, the clack of a keyboard at midnight when someone searches for apartments and answers. There's a human cost even when accountability is correct. Older adults recognize that double edge. I poured a cup and stood by the sink until the steam thinned. Choices had consequences. That's not revenge, that's gravity. I thought about the gala and how quick laughter can age into silence. In a different life, maybe Derek stays a forgettable name on a business card. In this one, he becomes a cautionary tale in HR training. The text thread quieted. I closed the messages and opened my window an inch. Fresh air isn't a cure, but it helps. Ashley lost more than a job. The network that had once lifted her now stepped away. Numbers unfollowed, messages unanswered, doors politely closed. Reputation doesn't shatter, it erodes. One coffee declined, one introduction canceled. One, we're reviewing budgets. That means not you. I didn't watch it unfold in detail. I kept my distance the way you do from a house you've already moved out of. But you can feel absence from a county away. The strangest part was how quiet the apartment felt, like the air itself respected the new perimeter. I vacuumed, wiped down counters, and set 2 plates in the cabinet because I like order even when I live alone. People think freedom is noise, music up, nights out. Sometimes it's the opposite, a room that isn't carrying your arguments. I sat at the table with my coffee and let the silence make its case. In the ledger of loss, what I'd lost was familiar. What I'd kept was mine. The first morning I woke up not tired, I noticed the sunlight hit the stovetop like a small blessing. I ground the beans slower than usual and let the kettle tell time. Coffee at home has its own truth. If you rush it, it tells on you. I sat by the window with a paperback I've been saving for later for 3 years. Later finally showed up. Older folks will understand how a single quiet hour can feel more luxurious than any vacation you can't afford right now. I read 10 pages, then read them again because the words landed differently in a quieter life. The apartment smelled like toast and detergent. Normal is underrated until it returns. I thought of my father's advice. When you get knocked back, reach for the smallest routine and make it loyal. I rinsed the mug and set it on the rack with the handle turned right. That tiny alignment felt like a promise kept. The best revenge isn't hot, I said to the room, testing the line against the wall. It's cold, calculated, final. Not a slogan, a standard. Hot burns you too. Cold preserves what's worth saving. Calculated means you measured twice, cut once. Final means you stop reopening the wound just to check if it still hurts. I saved the file I'd been keeping, records, and created a new one, lessons. Page 1, dignity is a daily habit. Page 2, silence buys options. Page 3, never confuse spectacle with strength. I'm not trying to become a preacher in my own kitchen. I'm trying to give future me a map. If you've ever written instructions on a furnace filter for the next season, you know the feeling. I closed the laptop and looked around the room that had heard more truth in a week than my house did in a year. The temperature felt right. So did the decision not to gloat. That's its own victory. People will tell you silence is surrender. Folks who've lived longer know better. Silence can be a tool, like a level that proves whether a surface is as steady as it claims. Mine wasn't passive, it was directional. Quiet let me step around every trap that would have turned me into the villain of my own story. When I wanted to text something sharp, I typed it and let it sit in drafts until it embarrassed me into deleting it. When I wanted to relive the ballroom, I pictured the coat rack instead, the place where I decided to leave. That choice became the spine of everything that followed. The calls I made, the receipts I kept, the door I opened without slamming another. If you've ever held your tongue at a family gathering and drove home proud of yourself, you know the strength I'm talking about. The day passed without drama. That counted as progress. I slept early and woke clear. I built my new routine the way you fix a fence, post by post. Laundry on Sundays, groceries on Wednesdays after work when the lines are short. A walk after dinner, phone left on the counter so my brain can walk too. I fixed the loose cabinet hinge and replaced the batteries in the smoke detector because little chores keep you out of big trouble. Older neighbors nodded at me in the hall, the quiet fraternity of people who know how to carry on. I set autopay, updated beneficiaries, checked the air and the tires. None of it makes good television. All of it makes a good life. I even cooked, nothing fancy, just eggs done right and toast with real butter. The apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt uncluttered. That's a difference you learn after 40. Peace isn't the absence of sound. It's the absence of dread. I went to bed with the window cracked and woke up to birds. Saturday afternoon, my son Noah buzzed the door. He's 15, all limbs and questions, taller every month. We ordered pizza, the normal kind you fold, and argued about whether pineapple counts. He told me about a teacher who still uses overhead projectors and a friend who wants to rebuild a dirt bike. I told him how to bleed brakes and what a torque wrench is for. We laughed at a movie we'd both seen 10 times. At some point he looked around and said, "It's quiet here." Not judgment, observation. "Yeah," I said, "on purpose." He nodded like that made sense in a language only men in the same family speak. When he left, he hugged me quick, the way teenage boys do when they're braver than they admit. After the door closed, I stood a minute and let the room hold that memory. Corporate chaos used to fill our calendar. Tonight, it made room for pepper flakes on a paper plate and a good joke. The old life had a soundtrack. Notifications, calendar pings, shoes on tile at midnight. The new life sounds different. A kettle settling, a book closing, a chair scooting back from a table that's seen more dinners than arguments. I put a small plant by the window and a toolbox under the sink because both comfort me. One grows, the other fixes. I wrote Noah's weekend on a sticky note and stuck it to the fridge. Saturday pizza, Sunday park. Predictable in the best way. When the mind reaches for the ballroom, I give it the grocery list. Coffee, bread, oranges, paper towels. That list has saved more men than pride ever did. I don't pretend I don't hurt. I just refuse to rehearse the hurt. I folded the blanket over the back of the couch the way my mother did and realized I'd built a home without buying anything new. That felt like wealth. Not the kind you post, the kind you sleep in. I used to think payoff meant applause, that some grand moment would tell me I'd won. Turns out payoff sounds like a door that closes gently and stays closed. It's a truck that starts on the first turn. It's a boy who texts, "On my way," and shows up when he says he will. I made coffee and stood by the window, the same window that watched me start over. I considered sending one last message, to Ashley, to the world, to the comment section. Then I shut the impulse down and chose my actual life instead. A bird landed on the fire escape railing and flicked its head like it had somewhere to be. Same. I rinsed the mug, locked the door, and headed out into a day that didn't owe me drama. The best part of the story was no longer the downfall. It was the rebuild. And the rebuild, finally, was underway. I won't pretend the road was noble or neat. It was necessary. Ashley called me worthless in a crowded room. But tonight, I close this story with something cleaner than applause. Proof. Quiet didn't make me small. It made me steady. I planned when shouting would have burned what I needed to save. my name, my work, my bond with my son. Older men taught me this. When the storm hits, you tighten what holds. I tightened, and the house still stands. If you're where I was, humiliated in public, doubting yourself in private, hear me plain. Dignity travels further than drama. Keep records, keep your word, keep your temper. Let the facts do what fists can't. I'm not out for revenge, I'm out for order. That's the payoff. A life that fits again, a morning that doesn't flinch, a man who knows he's not what someone said. Quiet isn't weak, it's ready. If you believe in truth over lies, comment, I choose truth.